the challenges of climate change in Nigeria. So my basic outline has to do with introduction and overview of climate change, the efforts on ground at addressing the challenge of climate change in Nigeria, effect of corruption through poor governance on the effort to effectively address climate change, and finally, a way forward. Climate change, an overview. The overview is centered on the following 5 pronouncements. Climate change threatens people with increased flooding, extreme heat, increased food and water scarcity, more disease and economic loss, human migration and conflict are results of climate change. 2, efforts on ground at reducing climate greenhouse gases emissions, amelioration of loss of diversity, adapting to climate change through efforts like flood control measures or drought-resisting crops partially reduces climate change risks. Number 3, the World Health Organization calls climate change the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. 4, societies and ecosystems will experience more severe risk without action to limit global warming. And 5, poorer countries are responsible for a small share of global emissions contributing to climate change, yet have the least ability to adapt and are most vulnerable to climate change. So what are the efforts at addressing the challenges of climate change in Nigeria? Here again, I have 5 major areas that can be identified. Number 1 has to do with Nigeria oppose international environmental law principles because it's part and parcel of global environment. So along this direction, these principles include states have sovereignty over their natural resources and the responsibility not to cause environmental damage, especially to their neighbors. Precautionary principle of good neighborliness and international cooperation, principle of sustainable development, polluter pays principle of common but differentiated responsibility, principle of preventive action. The second category here has to do with constitutional provisions. In the Nigerian Constitution, now sections 20 and 33 of the Constitution of Nigeria and articles 16 and 24 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights make it mandatory a duty of the nation to protect and improve the environment and safeguard the water, air, and land, forests, and wildlife of Nigeria. In addition, Section 2 of the Environmental Impact Assessment Act of 1992 provides that the public or private sector of the economy should not undertake or embark on or authorize projects or activities without prior consideration of the effect on the environment. The third item here has to do with national policy on the environment. And the goal of the national policy on the environment is to achieve sustainable development in Nigeria, and in particular, to secure quality environment adequate for good health and well-being, conserve and use the environment and natural resources for the benefit of the present and future generations. And third, restore, maintain, and enhance the ecosystems and ecological processes essential for the functioning of the biosphere to preserve biological diversity and the principle of optimum sustainable yield in the use of natural resources and ecosystems. 4, revise the public awareness and promote understanding of the essential linkages between the environment, resources, and development, and encourage individual and community participation in environmental improvement efforts. And lastly, to cooperate in good faith with other countries, international organizations, and agencies to achieve optimal use of transboundary natural resources and effective prevention or abatement of transboundary environmental degradation. The fourth one, national climate change policy and programs. The essential dimension here is to achieve sustainable development in Nigeria, and number 2, promulgation of various laws and domestication of treaties and protocols and regulations to safeguard the Nigerian environment. And lastly, the 2021 Climate Change Act. What is it all about? Essentially, it has to do with prevent, stop, or discontinue the performance of any act that is harmful to the environment. 2, compel any public official to act to prevent or to stop the performance of any act that is harmful to the environment. And lastly, compensate victims directly affected by the acts that are harmful to the environment. These specifically include climate change harms. These are the efforts that are being on ground to help us make sure that we're able to address environmental challenges. But despite the presence of these instruments of regimes and programs in place, Nigeria still has a long way to go. However, one of the major obstacles at effectively confronting the challenges of climate change in Nigeria is the issue of corruption and poor governance. This is one of the reasons why global initiatives like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 16 has a targeted goal to substantially reduce corruption in all of its forms. So what are the effect of corruption, the effect of corruption, poor governance on the effort to effectively address climate change in Nigeria? So first of all, what is corruption? In the context of public life, corruption is an abuse of public power for a private benefit. It is a form of dishonesty or a criminal offense which is undertaken by a person or an organization which is entrusted in a position of authority in order to acquire illicit benefits for personal gain. Many criminal and unethical acts that can constitute corruption may involve activities such as bribery, influence peddling, and embezzlement. And it may also involve practices which are illegal in many countries. Political corruption occurs when an office holder or other governmental employee acts in an official capacity for personal gain. So one of the effects is cost of corruption in relation to climate change in Nigeria is the slow and inadequate responses to natural disasters, which are increasing in frequency. This comes in the form of weakened fiscal space to address urgent needs, such as the climate crisis. As the United Nations First National Intelligence estimate to focus on Climate Change put it, countries dependent on fossil fuels for revenues, and I quote, struggle to diversify their sources of export revenue because of entrenched political interests, endemic corruption, and the lack of economic and legal institutions. The second problem here is mitigation strategies can be weakened by corruption. The path to sustainable forestry, for example, must pass through a ticket of corruption in concessions, enforcement bodies, at customs, and in overseas markets, leading to low and misuse of revenues. Renewable energy sources, such as solar, show promise as long as corruption doesn't misdirect subsidies, inflate the costs, and throw sight on its efficacy. The third dimension or effect of corruption is at global level. Global platform, the West make pledges to challenge climate change. For instance, in the recent African Climate Platform, will these pledges be redeemed? This is not the first time pledges of this kind have been made before. In the past, most of them were not kept. What is the guarantee that they will be kept this time around? In the true sense of the word, this may be taken as deceit, which is corruption in another gap. For in 1984, the Berlin Conference marked the official beginning of colonialism in Africa. One of the justifying principles behind colonialism was the need to civilize the purportedly backward peoples of Africa and exploit their resources. As the attitude of the West changed in the way it treats the African continent. So what are we going to say in terms of the way forward? One of the efforts that can be made by way of way forward, one, reducing the greenhouse gases emissions. We have to continue to do this as part of way forward. Two, ameliorating the loss of biodiversity. It takes an immediate action by initiating the preparation of a national biodiversity strategy and action plan. The goal of the plan is to conserve Nigeria's biodiversity and enhance its sustainable use by integrating biodiversity conservations into national planning policy and decision-making process. Emphasis is placed on biodiversity conservation within protected areas such as forest reserves and national parks. The effort along this direction is yet to be adequate. Three, the civil society must also be part and parcel of the process of doing something about challenges, about environmental challenge. No one is better placed to mobilize people's support than the civil society organizations. This is because of their closeness to the citizens at the grassroots. In addition, drawing on their inherent strength of working quickly and flexibly, whereas for the government, working out policies and their implementation might take a while, civil societies are able to speedily tackle climate challenges that appear to be fast growing out of hand. Civil society must be heavily involved in challenging climate change. Number four, the West. All the old instruments of domination seen from the perspective of the Africans, like World Bank, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, World Health Organization, and international economic relations, built on the exploitative and excessive national interest ideology, must be restructured to the advantage of the wretched of the earth. The restructuring must be built on the strong pillars of fairness, justice, equity, and the rule of all for all. From this perspective, decisions, allocation of resources, and implementation of programs to challenge and ameliorate the effect of climate change will be based on needs and not on the basis of national interest ideology. In relation to the church, if the church must be relevant in this context, it must work vigorously to impact on the morality of global politics that is fast losing any interest in ethics as it pursues global challenges in its global politics. Lastly, the church must vigorously uphold the heritage of the planet as a gift to all human beings, rich and poor, protect and sustain it. This is to be reflected not only in its dogmatic pronouncements, teaching in its institutions, but also in its socio-economic ministry and political engagement with the global world. Conclusion. Loss of biodiversity and climate change are both driven by human economic activities and mutually reinforce each other. Neither will be successfully resolved unless both are tackled. Just as humans are responsible for these multiple crises, it must be affirmed that human beings also have the power to decide on sustainable solutions to change the ugly part of climate change. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Father Oyeshola. Our floor is now open for questions and reflections. There is one question from our online audience.
Good afternoon, Father. This is a question from our online participant. Based on your personal observation, how involved is the Catholic Church in Nigeria in trying to address the problem of climate change? Is there an avenue for the Church to work with the Nigerian government?
Okay. Yes, the Church is also trying to do something in this direction. We have a part of the strategy that is put in place. This has to do with peace and justice movement, which every diocese is having. However, most of the activities and programs there are not particularly addressing environmental challenges per se. From time to time, people go to secondary schools, encouraging students to be planting trees. From time to time, if there is any environmental crisis, the Church calls on the state to act and do something about that. But in terms of, for example, in many of the theological institutions, environment dimension is very, very small, if there is anything at all. So by way of quick summary, I would say the effort of the Church in this respect is still very, very weak. This is my take on this point.
Thank you, Father. We would like to acknowledge also Professor Zander.
Yeah, thank you, Dokun, for this contribution. My question concerns the possibilities in Nigeria. How dangerous is it to be engaged in anti-corruption activities with regard to ecology?
Yeah, That's a very good question. It's extremely difficult and dangerous to be engaged along this direction because people are benefiting handsomely when things are not done in the right way. Say, for example, many years back, Ken Saro-Wiwa and his people in the oil-polluting area of Nigeria challenged the government that something needed to be done. Before too long, Ken Saro-Wiwa, the activists, and 9 other individuals were eventually eliminated. That tells you how serious is the risk of challenging the government or trying to do anything about corruption. Again, many of the people who are causing problems of corruption are the people who are on top, government functionaries, and they have power of finance, power of connection, powers of all kinds, and they can use all these instruments to more or less get to anybody who tries to challenge them in any way. So except you are particularly very strong and powerful yourself and very, very courageous, it can be very, very dangerous to more or less challenge the government because the government in so many instances may come to you by proxy, by sending talks, by kidnapping, by harassing, by more or less saying something against you that may be very incriminating. So these are the manifestations of the way corruption is now being used as an instrument to silence anyone who tries to challenge the government or government officials who are also interested to get a lot of money, resources, in order to give it to take it to the way to benefit from all that type of activities. When a government functionary confronts someone that's doing something wrong, once money is given to him, he will simply change red to become green. So this is part of the problem that we are facing in this part of the world. At the moment, it's very, very difficult to challenge corruption, particularly in high places.
Thank you, Father. Other questions? If none, may I raise a question, Father? I'm interested in knowing what initiatives or efforts the Dominicans, especially the Dominican University in Ibadan, are doing to help solve the climate crisis and also possibly other human rights problems in the area. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to begin by saying Dominican University is a very, very young university, about 6 years old. And we are still trying to put things in place. That notwithstanding, ultimately, within the next few years, a department in relation to the Department of International Relations, trying to see how nations interact, what are the major factors at play in so many contexts. That will be in place. Effort is being made towards that. But concretely, we have different setups. We have a ministry by some of our brothers who are in the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Peace and Justice. So they are also, in their own little ways, trying to confront environmental challenges, calling attention to some of these challenges, encouraging other brothers to do the same. And in their different ministry, by way of preaching in their respective parishes and all that, they're also making efforts along that direction. And from time to time, they collaborate by also attending conferences, workshops that are addressing some of these issues. So these are some of the areas by which the university is also involved in the area of working for justice in the context of climate change and environmental challenges around us.
Thank you, Father. I ask that in view of the implementation of the Salamanca process in the order. It's very heartwarming to know that even though, as you said, Ibadan University is a very young Dominican university, but already the DNA of our advocacy for human rights is already very much in place. So thank you, Father. Other questions or reflections? If there are none, let's give a warm round of applause to our third discussant, Father Dokun Oyeshola, OP.